Let's take a walk through the woods. And today I'm going to be talking about things that people have said to me about my running going back decades. Some of them are positive, some of them are good, but I think they're all enlightening. So I'd like to share some of that, a bit of that today. The first thing was something my dad said to me. I think I was about 10 years old. And I grew up in Falmouth, Massachusetts, and at the old Lawrence School, there used to be some tennis courts and a track. And my family would go play tennis down there, and after one tennis match, my brother and two sisters and I decided to have a race. There was this old bank track at the school. I don't know, I've heard it's like 11 laps to the mile with these huge banks on either side. And we decided to have a race, one lap around. And me, not being endowed with fast twitch muscles, finished last to my brothers and sisters. So I was slightly embarrassed, so I decided to keep running. And I ran another lap, ran another lap, ran another lap, and I kept going. My brothers and sisters weren't too happy with that. They wanted to get home, but I kept running. My dad said eventually I did 2 miles around that track. He said to me later, "Jim, someday you'll make a good cross-country runner." I had no idea what being a cross-country runner was, so I wasn't sure what that meant. In my little mind, I didn't make sense that you would run across a country. But those words stuck with me, that someday I would be a good cross-country runner. Eventually, I decided to take up the sport. And in 9th grade, I decided to go up for cross-country for Falmouth High School. I wasn't the best runner on the team. My buddy and I were the 2 worst on the team. But I made it through that freshman year. And then winter track came around, and we had the brand new Falmouth High School with a indoor field house with a track in it, and I decided my next adventure in sports would be the pole vault. I thought that would be a fun sport to learn, so one day at winter track practice at the beginning of the year, I went up to the field coach and I asked, could I try the pole vault? I'd like to do that. He looked at skinny, scrawny me. I don't think I'd probably weighed 90 pounds at that time, and he said, "Keep running circles around the track." And I did. Never got to try the pole vault. That is until years later, and I'll tell you that story eventually. The next one was probably the stupidest thing ever said to me by someone. I was in 11th grade. I was at a boarding school, Stony Brook School on Long Island, and I was running spring track. It was a track meet. And I was sitting with some friends, and there was a teacher also. I think he was also helping out with sprint coaching and things like that. I won't give his name, but he leaned over to me, and I can still remember his exact words to me. He said, "Jim, why do you keep running? You're never going to be any good at it." Yeah, that one hurt. And I was destined to prove him wrong, and I think I have. On the other hand, one of the greatest men I ever met was my high school, Stony Brook School cross-country coach, Mr. Marvin Goldberg. A fantastic person, worthy of respect, a great high school coach, coached many championship runners. I wasn't really one of those. But I will tell you this, I think he looked out for me in other ways besides just my running. He looked for you as a full person. He was instrumental in getting me to my 2nd and 3rd years at the Stony Brook School because my parents did not want me to attend any further. Also, he helped get me into the college I went to, Wheaton College. Sat me down with a coach when they were visiting in the area for dinner at their table, and built me up as a runner in front of him. Not that I was being recruited, but I think he set me up for 2 extra years at Stony Brook School and for my 4 years at Wheaton College. Anyhow, one day I was having a really rough day at track practice. We were running like half a mile around the field and half a mile fast. and doing that a few times, and it was one of those days where I just felt dead. My legs were not moving. I was supremely tired, and I certainly was bringing up the bottom of the pack, and I just felt miserable, wanted to go to sleep. I was that tired. And at the end of the practice, Mr. Goldberg called me over, and he said, Jim, he put his big hand around me. I could feel the weight of his arm across my back. And he said, you have some talent. You can be a good runner someday. I really respected Mr. Goldberg. Great coach. I graduated from college in 1981. Ran there, cross country. Just like in high school, I made it to varsity. Top seven, my senior year. Steady, slow improvement. Two of the favorite things I did in high school and in college was running cross country and running track. After I graduated, I wanted to know where to go. I'd already been doing marathons. I wasn't too good at that either. I was thinking of ultra marathons. Then one day in early 1983, the televised broadcast of Wide World of Sports was of the Hawaiian Ironman Triathlon, and we watched in fascination and horror as Julie Moss crawled to the finish line. I watched that event and said I have to do that someday, as well as many other people. That spring at the Boston Marathon, Dave McGillivray announced that he would be doing an Ironman distance triathlon and hold it at Cape Cod, where I was from. And even though I had no experience in swimming and biking except for having a cheap bicycle and riding it around as a kid a lot and swimming in the ocean, I decided I was going to sign up for that thing. The race would be in September. I started training the best I could. There was not much knowledge about triathlons in those days and what it involved, and I would swim in a pond or swim down by the ocean, ride my bike, and run. I did a sprint triathlon, a middle distance triathlon, held in Falmouth. Julie Moss was one of the guests of the race, and eventually in September was the Cape Cod Endurance Triathlon. And that's when my parents said to me, are you sure you want to do this? You might die if you try to do this. And they were very serious. They had watched Julie Moss collapse in Hawaii. Not much was known about the triathlon. Not even 3,000 people worldwide have ever completed an Ironman distance at that race. I did the race. I completed it somehow. Got heavily involved in triathlon for 5 years, including 4 more Cape Cod Endurance Triathlons. Some of the best years of my life that I really enjoyed the competition, and I enjoyed the event, and I enjoyed doing something related to running but slightly different, and those were great years. After my 5th year doing the Cape Cod Endurance Triathlon, my body was broken. I didn't know what the problem was. I didn't fit real well on the bicycle. I knew my leg pointed out to the side, and in those days the new clip-on pedals did not allow any motion. They just held you tight. My back was in really bad condition. I actually felt that I had destroyed it so much I'd be in a wheelchair in a couple of years. And I was getting married and I was having a hard time standing up. Most days I learned from shouldn't have learned, but I learned from an osteopath to crack my back, and I was doing that multiple times a day trying to find relief. And I went to an orthopedic doctor to find out what to do, because I was getting married and I wanted to be able to stand up straight during my marriage and wedding. And I went to an orthopedic doctor, and he told me, you should never run a step again in your life. That one hit hard, but I knew my body was not responding well to all the activity I was doing. So I said, oh, that's okay. I really like biking. I'm good at that, so I'll do biking instead. He said, actually, you should not do any biking either. I walked out of that office, decided not to pay attention to him, and decided I was going to find my own way one way or another. 10 years later, I was still trying out different therapists, different therapies, I was still running marathons, but my hip and back were really sore. And all the time, I was always fighting my own body. So I took another trip to a new physical therapist, and she was a young girl. And she said, I don't really know what to do, but I'm going to ask around, which I thought was really impressive. She talked to lots of people. She actually found a really good stretch for me that she did. And I was able to run pain-free for a while. And she said one thing to me that probably rings true of more than anything else anyone else has said. And that is, you were so made for running, and you were so not made for running. I was still running, doing well for my running club, Gate City Striders, running the Boston Marathon. And the year 2000 came around, and it was time to sign up for the Boston Marathon, except we had a superintendent that decided he didn't want teachers to take a day off to run Boston. And he had a new contract written, the union signed it, saying you may not take a day off for free or leisure time activity, and he said that was running Boston would be leisure time activity. It became a big hullabaloo in the press. This was 25 years ago. Newspaper articles, arguments and conversations with the superintendent. But his words to me were, no, you may not take a personal day off from teaching to run the Boston Marathon. And so I had to find another way. And I hooked up with Dave McGilvery, told him the situation, and I taught my full day of school, and 2 carloads of teachers drove me down to Hopkinton after the day of school at 4 o'clock. We met up with Dave McGilvery, who had race directed the race and was now going to continue his streak of running Boston Marathon every year, but he has to do it after the race since he is the race director. And we ended up running the Boston Marathon together that year. An earlier thing that someone said, but it wasn't about my running directly, but when I was in high school for graduation, we had a special guest speaker because his youngest son was in my graduating class, and that would be the Reverend Billy Graham. And he gave his speech, which I don't remember, but I do remember his last lines. I think he was quoting Winston Churchill, but I made that sort of a motto for myself. And I'll always remember Billy Graham saying, never give up, never give up, never, never, never. In 2011, I finally had to have hip surgery for a torn labrum in my hip. This is the result of the back problems that I experienced trying to clip myself into a bike and riding all those miles. It started as back pain, but I think it was really that my hip was getting jammed up into its socket due to a deformity in my hip. And so I had to get hip surgery. And before the doctor put me under for surgery, he said to me at Newton Wellesley Hospital, which is like the 16-mile mark of the Boston Marathon, he said to me, you'll be up and running in no time. I was, actually. He told me a few weeks later, hey, you can start running now if it doesn't feel any problem. There was no protocol, no physical therapy. He was just letting it go. My muscles were so imbalanced. I could not run. I could run, but I was limping afterwards, limping during. And it took 12 years before I started figuring out. I still run the limp today with some hip problems, but it took till 2022 till I started putting it together and becoming a runner again. Those years in between, I relied on the elliptigo for my competitive spirit and to keep active and moving in that running feeling. There's a couple things that was said to me a few times by different people, so I don't really attribute it to anyone, but people have said these, and they're words I sort of live by anyhow. And one is, people have always said to me, whether it was when I started finding the elliptigo to replace the running or other activities, is you will always find a way. Yeah, if there's something you love to do, you're going to find a way to do it. And I really like to exercise. I like endurance events. I like movement. So yeah, I'm always going to find a way. People never thought I'd ever get back to running after my hip surgery and 10 years or more off. And they were very surprised when they found out I had made a pretty big and massive comeback after all those years where I could not run at all. The other one that people have often said to me is, let your body do its own thing, and it will find its own way. Inserts don't work with me. All these different therapies that people have told me don't really work with my body. I had to find my own way to make things work. Let your body do its own thing. It works in its own peculiar way, and eventually that is what works best for me. So just let your body do its own thing, and it will find its own way. We really don't run for the accolades or the things that people say to us about our running. In the grand scheme of life, the running doesn't mean much. It just gives us lots of pleasure. It gives us something that we enjoy doing, and people to run and race with and train with that we enjoy their company. And I've mentioned this before in a prior video. In my high school yearbook, you could put a quote, and I found something that Frank Shorter said in a book or an article, and he said this, and I quote Frank: "To me, the object is not to beat someone, but merely to live up to your potential. If you do, then you will end up winning a lot." That is my philosophy, and I've taken that to heart. And so this last thing was not said to me directly, but do you remember back in 2000 when I couldn't run the Boston Marathon? Previous to that, when I had run Boston, one of my fourth grade students wrote to the local newspaper a letter to the editor. Even his parents said, we didn't know he was writing that. I didn't know he was writing that. But he wrote this: "My teacher, Mr. James Hansen, ran in the 100th Boston Marathon on Monday, so it was 1996, April 15th. I am very proud of Mr. Hansen. He didn't win, but he taught our class a lot about trying your best and believing in yourself. The next time I compete in a sport or in school, I will try my best and not worry about winning. Mr. Hansen taught me you win when you try your best." And I think hearing a young student say something that, they've caught something about my attitude toward running, and they put it to words, and they sent it to a newspaper, and I don't think there is any better thing that someone has said, because he basically repeated the philosophy and the feeling of what Frank Shorter said and what I take to heart about running. You run to do your best. And probably the funniest thing I heard while I was running was at this year's Boston Marathon. My family came out to the 12-mile mark to cheer me on. My wife, my son, my daughter-in-law, and a granddaughter. And I was able to see them there and turn around backwards and give them a hug before continuing on with the race. And I thought that's all they were going to do. And I was nearing the finish line, Kenmore Square. I'm on the right side of the road because my running club stays after the race we go to the hotel there right on Kenmore Square. So I was seeing if any of my teammates were out front there. I didn't see any. And all of a sudden, in the noise of that location with hundreds and hundreds of fans cheering, all of a sudden I heard something without really hearing it. There was a sound, a voice. I didn't know what it was, but it caught my attention. And I looked around and I heard this screaming, "Jim, Jim, Jim, Dad, Dad, Dad." I go, what? It woke my consciousness, and I turned, and there's my family. They're on the complete other side of the road, and my son is screaming his head off, trying to get my attention. Well, he did indeed get my attention, and I was so happy to see them.
Here he is! Here he is!
In 2024, around February, I was just in the middle of my great comeback to running as an age group competitor. And I saw a notification about a race I'd never heard of before, or an event I never heard of before, called the Tetradecathlon. And it was listed as a 2-day World Championship event to be held in Boston at the Reggie Lewis track. I had gone seeing world famous runners run indoor races at that track before. I always wondered what it would be like to run there. And the Tetradecathlon is 14 events over 2 days. Every indoor track and field event, each competitor must complete. So, if I get this right, there were the throwing events, the weight throw, the shot put, jumping events, the high jump, the pole vault, and this is where I finally have a chance to test my mettle at the pole vault. At 65 years old, after being told in 9th grade to keep running circles around the track. There were sprints. There's the hurdle, 60-meter hurdle, 60-meter sprint, 200, 400, 800, 1500, 3000 meter, 5000 meters. So 14 events in all over 2 days. And I wasn't sure, since I had no background in anything but the distance running, if this was something I should even try to enter. So I wrote to the organizer of the race, and I first off inquired, is this something I can do? Am I allowed to do it? And then I explained I had no background in any of the events except the distance running, but I'd like to give it a try. And she wrote back, and she basically said that this is an event that all participants find difficult, but most of the participants are veterans of these events, whether they're field athletes, sprinters. And she did say that distance runners sometimes have an advantage because a lot of these athletes are broken down and they're strength athletes. So she said I might do okay. And so I decided that maybe this is an event I can do. And this is what she wrote in her email. She said, "It sounds like you very much enjoy unique athletic challenges, and this is the one of the most fun and supportive events there are." And I gotta tell you, she was right. I never had more fun than I did those 2 days, probably except for going back to the first triathlons I did. I was learning new events. I was being coached on the spot. Yes, I pole vaulted, not very high, but I got over the pole vault. I had expert coaching. I triple jumped, long jumped, high jumped, shot put. I really liked that one, and the weight throw, and had to sprint out of blocks, and then got to enjoy the distance events where I felt more at home. I had so much fun doing that. It was a World Championships event, and I now am the proud owner of a age group second place World Championship medal, just for showing up and completing each event, because, well, there are only 2 people in my age group competing. But I never had so much fun. I love the camaraderie between myself and athletes from Europe and America, and never stop trying something new. Never give up on yourself. Find a way to do things that you think impossible, and you're going to have a heck of a lot of fun, because that's sort of like my career in sports. Not a great athlete, but someone who's out there having the most fun he can. So I ask you, in your running life, has there been any encouraging words, heartfelt words that people have said to you, or has someone said something completely ridiculous and you just had to prove them wrong in your own running? Let me know. I'm very curious. The running life is not just about the miles that you travel, but the people you meet along the way and how you interact with them, whether they see you as foolish or whether they're inspired by what you do. There's always something that someone has to say. Put your comments down below.